welcome. It is time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP, Urbana, 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening, and my name is Mr. Garza, and I am here to tell you that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. I would further like to inform you that views expressed are those of the speakers and are not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, Urbana Socialist Forum, or as we like to say on the TV version of this show, UPTV. These views are our own, and by our in this instance, if not in any other, I mean myself, obviously, and or anyone whose opinions I share with you by way of reading something they've written in a news article or whatever. I do not mean, in this instance, anybody else in the studio, because there is no one else in the studio. The closest thing to another human would probably be my computer, which is a very, very limited capacity mental being, a low-level artificial intelligence of sorts. Maybe my cell phone. It's got Siri on there, so it can actually talk to me, although I never use it. But yeah, nobody else's opinion. So when you hear something, and you notice I say when you hear it, not if you hear it, but when you hear something that you will find offensive or disturbing, or something where you say, hey, how can you say that? Blame me. Don't blame WRFU, IMC, blah, 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 and so on. Yes. So, welcome to the show. I know you're tired of me being here by myself, but I promise you I have guests lined up. I have a whole list, in fact, that was just sent to me of guests that will be on in upcoming shows who will be talking about all sorts of interesting things. Every year when the school goes away and then comes back, there's a period in there where they're just, there's not a lot of guest material around. I've already hit up everybody who lives around here, I think, and they have either already been on the show or really don't want to be like on the radio or on TV or something like that. And they're like, well, I did that. It's like, well, so did I, but I come back and do it again week after week. So you can too, but they don't necessarily see it that way. There are the more outgoing types, I suppose, who wouldn't mind being on all the time, but they happen to also be very busy, so they're hard to get. And then the people that aren't quite so busy are often not quite so outgoing. So anyway, be that as it may, I am here. And you may ask, you may wonder, I know that a few episodes ago, a while ago, whatever it was, I sort of gave a history of the show, such as it is, but it's been a long time since I've given you a history of the CU Immigration Forum itself. And I don't have like all the exact dates or things like that, but CU Immigration Forum grew out of the idea that there were a number of people, or not the idea, let me step back a minute. It grew out of the realization, I should put it that way, that there were a number of people who worked on issues of immigration in this area who kept running into each other over and over again, and eventually forming various kinds of working, semi-working relationships with each other, because they kept doing the same sort of things and bumping into each other. It's like, oh, you've talked to so-and-so. Well, so have I. And, over time, there was this loosely knit group, I could say, of people who worked on issues relative to immigration. And it just seemed like at some point the idea was, we ought to get together and discuss this stuff, because often I find myself answering questions that you have, and I find myself asking you questions, and other people ask me the same question that you just asked me, and so I have to repeat the same answer to them later at a different point, and so on and so forth. So it seemed like, what if we got all these people together, all these interested parties, and brought them together on a regular basis and just sat down and talked about things and shared information? That was the point of CU Immigration Forum. And it quickly grew in different directions from there, like almost immediately upon forming, like within the first couple of meetings, I think, if memory serves, an offshoot of that started to form that we called at the time, it was something like, I don't even remember what we called it. It was like the Immigration Study Group or something like that. And the idea was, it just came out of a meeting, and several of us were sitting around, and it was like, well, this secure communities thing, it's really bothering us. And you were talking about different things that you've heard, and I mentioned some things I've heard, and so on, and different people were saying that, and it became clear that more information was needed in order to understand what was going on, because we didn't understand the secure communities thing. We knew the hype, we knew the publicity for it, which was basically criminal aliens are going to be identified and deported, and in order to make that possible, local law enforcement was going to share information with ICE, and ICE would then turn around and say, John Doe, that we have someone by that name that we're looking for who robbed a bank here in Chicago. And so please hold this person, and we're going to come down and get them, because if they are indeed the John Doe that robbed the bank, then we want, rather than, put the community through the expense and time of sending them to trial and putting them in jail, we'll just deport them, because we don't want people that rob banks here, or whatever. It was based around that idea loosely. We're going to get these dangerous criminals and deport them, rather than keep them here and allow them to possibly commit further crimes. So that was the idea of it as it was expressed. What we were running into, however, in our various relationships with members of the immigrant community, were that so-and-so would be stopped for speeding, or for having a tail light out, or some vague thing like you crossed the median, or you didn't signal when you turned right on a red light, or something like that. And then suddenly they would just disappear, and they'd be gone, and their family would be like, what happened to this person? And then we'd find out that they were in jail, and they'd been there for this extended time because ICE had sent a hold. And so without going into, we've talked about this before, without going into long, involved explanation of the thing, basically Secure Communities was functioning as a task force for plucking low-hanging fruit, if I can put it that way. In other words, it was the easiest to find people whose documentation was not correct were being grabbed, nabbed, and sent away. And further, it didn't function in any of the ways that it was supposed to. For example, they were only supposed to be held for 48 hours, and sometimes they'd be there for weeks. And you'd have jail personnel who were actually misleading people as to what might happen to them in order to keep them, so that they'd be there for ICE, who would slap on a hold, but then wouldn't show up sometimes for weeks to pick them up. So people were literally being picked up for next to nothing, and instead of being ticketed and released, or whatever, the usual thing that would happen to you in this very, very minor infraction, they would end up in jail. And they'd just sit there. And a family member would want to bring bail money. They'd be advised not to do that. It's like, well, they're just going to be deported anyway, so, don't waste your money. And, so people were just disappearing into jail and not coming out until ICE came to get them, and then they were going away. So this study group was immediately formed as sort of an offshoot of CU Immigration Forum. So we would do both at the same time. We had CU Immigration Forum, then we'd have the study group, and we visited the jail, we talked to the sheriff, we did all these different things, and then at the CU Immigration meetings we would share that information, and over time, not very much time, very quickly, in fact, CU Immigration Forum became a group that actually did things, that got together and tried to identify a problem and worked to solve that problem. So it very quickly morphed from a group that was simply supposed to be people talking about experiences and sharing them, sharing information, sharing resources with each other, to a group that actively attempted to make this a better place for immigrants. And that kind of leads us up to where we are now. Now we have all sorts of subgroups that work on various things, and we attempt to actually be a resource in the community for people who are suffering or just having difficulties or just not sure where to go or confused or whatever the case may be. So anyway, that's just a little history of CU Immigration Forum that I thought might be interesting to you. And I suppose as long as I'm talking about that group, I should tell you that you are welcome to show up to our monthly meetings. We meet the second Tuesday of every month at the University YMCA or some other place as designated, but it's usually the University YMCA at 5 p.m. And that monthly meeting has changed in character over time as the character of the group has changed. It started out as just a sort of a roundtable discussion where we'd all sit around and everyone sort of knew each other, and we just talk about things to new people coming in, so we'd start introducing ourselves, and it became a little more formal. At one point, when we decided to become a registered nonprofit, we had to organize even further, so we put together a board of directors and hired officers and so on, and then started running the meetings like Robert's Rules of Order kind of thing. That turned out to be a little stiff, and people were unhappy with that. So we tried various permutations. It's been an interesting experience, very much a learning experience for me in terms of how to create an environment where we get things done, we're able to produce results and get things done, and at the same time we welcome new people coming in, and we make them feel like they're a part of something, or like they can be a part of something if they want to. And so that's really been a fascinating process, and maybe I'll talk about that sometime, although that's probably not really germane to anything, but it's an interesting thing, and we're still working on it. But lately we've tried to learn from our name a little bit and become a forum again. So for the last several months, our meetings have been actual. We have a topic that we identify in advance, and we say, okay, next month's meeting is going to be about X, and then somebody presents on this topic people come and listen to that presentation, and at the end we have a little time for discussion and questions and things like that. This month, tomorrow night, if you're listening to this in real time, September 13th, at the University Y at 5 p.m., our topic will be wage theft, and we're going to talk about how immigrant people are often very vulnerable to that sort of thing, and we will discuss some recent incidents here in town where that has happened to people, where they've signed up to work for something and they've worked for several weeks in some cases, and then just not been paid. And it will give people resources as to what to do if that happens to you. I think we have some people who are going to come and talk about their personal experience. We have a lawyer coming down from Chicago who's going to discuss the legal aspects of it, and it should be very informative. So that's the kind of thing we do now, is we will present on a topic. Anyone who is interested at a meeting like that, you come, you see one of those things, and you go, wow, this is really interesting. I'd like to become involved, is welcome to join one of our working groups. My voice is changing. Pardon me. I'm going through puberty. One of our working groups, and they can then become involved and become an actual, functioning, productive member of the group. But you are more than welcome to just come to our monthly seminars. I guess you could. They're almost seminars these days, and just soak up information and sort of hang out with and meet like-minded people. So anyway, that's a little history. I just thought I wanted to share that. And let me broaden the conversation a little bit, and just talk about immigration in general, read some news and things like that. Probably by now, if you are on social media, you've run across the story of Fidencio Sanchez. And I thought this was interesting to bring up because our last episodes were the Labor Day episode, the special Labor Day edition of CU Immigration Forum, and I talked a lot about labor and how immigration and labor seem to be mixed together. I don't know of my own knowledge if the person in this story is an immigrant, but there are a number of indications that I won't go into that he is in fact an immigrant. But he is certainly a laborer, and if you pay attention to social media, you've probably heard about this. So this is regarding a GoFundMe campaign for a street vendor from Little Village in Chicago that has become, it's gone viral, as they like to say on the internet. And a person saw this man, his name's Fidencio Sanchez, struggling to push his paleta cart down on 26th Street in the Little Village neighborhood of Chicago. For those who don't know, paletas are like ice cream on a stick. We call them popsicles or ice cream sandwiches sometimes. Paleta is a Mexican version of that. And so I will quote the person that started the campaign. He says, "It broke my heart seeing this man that should be enjoying retirement still working at this age." He snapped a photo of the man and shared the experience on Facebook, and he got an enormous response, and that inspired him to start this GoFundMe, which is one of those online places where you put up a story and you say, hey, I'm having this problem. Someone ran into my car, didn't have insurance. I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. Help me out with this. Or people will say, I've got this idea for, I don't know, a new kind of mousetrap, and I'm looking for investors, that sort of thing. Just anybody looking for money can go to this website, and they put up a thing, and they search for people who want to just give them money to help them out. And I guess the website probably takes a percentage of it in order to fund its existence. Anyway, so this guy had the idea. He saw this man, and if you've seen the picture, it's pretty striking. There's this old guy, and he's pushing this cart, and he's just all hunched over. I mean, he looks so tired. Probably a lot of it is just that he's old and just has that stooped posture of age, but it just looks like it's hard to see someone working so hard at an age when they should really be relaxing and enjoying themselves and just taking it easy. But he looks like he's had a lifetime of hard work, and this is just more of it. So anyway, the guy who started this is Joel Macias. And he spoke to Sanchez, and he discovered that Sanchez and his wife had both sold paletas until his wife was hurt and she had to stop, and then they recently lost their only daughter and main support system. And so he thought, gosh, I've got to help them out. So that here, this 89, I think is how old he is. 89, is it? I'm not sure. I'll try to find it. 89-year-old man who is walking the streets with a paletas wagon, pushing it, selling these things for like $1 or $2 at a time. And so Macias started this campaign. He set the goal at $3,000, and so I looked it up. I've been keeping track of this on the GoFundMe website ever since I saw this. It doesn't say his name. Maybe somewhere it does. But anyway, as of now, in 2 days, they have raised $198,398. $198,398 in 2 days for this man. It's just amazing. Sorry, it chokes me up to think about it. So he's 89 years old. Here's a little bit from ABC. It says, an 89-year-old ice cream vendor who strolls the streets of the city's little village neighborhood has inspired a fundraising campaign. Fidencio Sanchez and his ice cream cart full of paletas, or popsicles, has been around for 23 years. He says, I wake up early and all day until 8 at night. So that's got to be like, what, 16-hour days? Or I don't know. Probably more like 12-hour days, something like that. So just a few weeks ago, his daughter died, and he and his wife were suddenly caring for 2 grandsons. So he inherited his grandsons from the death of his daughter. So he had to return to work. He had to start working more because he needed money. And he said, it's really hard working out here in the streets in the summer and cold winter. Even in bad weather, we still have to go out and sell, and the carts get stuck in the streets. So now, between news stories and social media, they've made a lot of money. And interestingly, he says, despite being gifted with the money, he plans to continue working. So I thought this was interesting, both because it's a human interest story, but also it gives you a sense of the work ethic that exists among a lot of the people that come here as immigrants. They don't, contrary to, oops, I'm banging the microphone, contrary to negative stereotypes that some people try to propagate in order to make others anti-immigrant, these are some of the hardest working people you could ever find. And it's really fascinating to just, peek into somebody's life like that. You don't know them. You don't have any real way that you would get to know them other than just maybe buying ice cream and saying, hey, how are you? You might hear little bits of their story, but when news people start poking in and asking questions, then you suddenly learn things about them. And that's I have to say, one of the interesting things about being in the Immigration Forum is that through working with people on various things, you find out something of their story. You actually meet them and you learn something about them. And I've made friends that way. I have friends now that I see and I know, whose stories I know, and I feel honored to have been involved in a bit of their life and in having the opportunity to try to be helpful in some way to someone who is working hard and wanting to do, like all of us, has plans and hopes and dreams and is working towards those things, but has to navigate a system that is not really set up to make that an easy thing for them. And really, if you could boil down what CU Immigration Forum is all about, our efforts, our hope, is to try to help lessen the difficulties that are inherent in the process because of the convoluted laws that we have and the sad way that a lot of politicians and people have tried to use the issue of immigration and the difficulties that have caused people to come here and often not follow the existing rules. They've tried to make that a political issue and demonize those people, and our only hope is to be able to help somehow and to make things easier and say, okay, I see you as a person. I don't see you as a statistic. I don't see you as a stranger. I don't see you as an example of something. I see you as a person. I talk to you as a person, and I am trying to figure out how to help you as a person. And that, to me, is what we should all be doing all the time with everybody. Personally, my philosophy, if you want to call it that, is you see someone, look at them. Actually look at them. Don't just go, oh, there's someone sitting there. But look at them and try to see, is this person having an easy time? Are they having a hard time? Is there something you could do to help them in some way? And if so, why aren't you doing it? Do you have to know somebody in order to help them? Do you have to be assured that you're going to get some sort of reward for it or some kind of recognition? Because if you are, then that's not a good reason to help somebody, and you're probably not going to help them very much. If your desire to help is based strictly around understanding what it's like to have difficulties and to need some assistance, then I think you'll do good things. And it doesn't matter if they're big things or small things, they'll be good things because the intention is correct. I don't know, and I don't want to try to speak to the controversy, the ages-old controversy about whether doing good for others is really a selfish act or not.